Hello. Welcome to the Turntable this Wednesday afternoon at 12 noon. We're so glad that you've taken time out of your day to join us in this conversation. I'm Jason Lawrence Turner. This is my wife, Bridgett Turner, and we're just excited about the conversation we're going to have today. And I hope that you would share it, share via Facebook Live or start a watch party, or if you're watching via our YouTube channel, would you subscribe to the Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church YouTube channel? This is going to be an exciting conversation.
If you hear our kids yelling throughout the course of this conversation, please forgive us. They are 7 and 5, and they are working through the COVID pandemic as well. So we told them to be quiet, but kids will be kids, so forgive us. So if you see me laugh, I'm laughing because I'm just praying in my head that they'll be silent. But in any event, we are happy to welcome Mr. Brenton Harrison with us this afternoon. He is a Nashville native at this moment. He is a financial advisor at the Henderson Financial Group, as well as a graduate of Oakwood University in Alabama.
And we're excited to have him. I tell people often, you need to have a personal board of directors, some people who can advise you in making key and critical life decisions. And we're glad to have him as part of our personal board of directors to help us navigate how to handle our finances and to plan for the future. I do want to give this disclaimer. If you're watching, we encourage you to reach out. We'll even give you information to reach out to him and the Henderson Financial Group as we close this conversation. But Bridgett and I are not giving you a financial advice, but we want to have a conversation because finances is a huge conversation to have in the midst of this pandemic. And so welcome, Brenton Harrison, to our conversation. I just want to start out by asking you a simple question, but how are you and your family doing, knowing that Nashville has just endured a devastating tornado, and then right after it, we're dealing with this pandemic. So how are you and your family doing?
Well, thank you for asking. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate the friendship. So I'm glad to share. It has, to answer your question, been an extremely trying time in Nashville. My family feels very fortunate that we have been close to danger, but not too greatly impacted by danger. The tornado actually came right by our house and, unfortunately destroyed a number of our friends and family members' homes and businesses. But we were just without power. So we were very fortunate in that regard. And then I have a number of members of my family who are healthcare providers who, are on the front lines and essential. So thankfully, all of them are in good health right now. So we're very fortunate for that. But when you add what's going on now with the tornado, everybody's struggling right now, but Nashville has been hit particularly hard. And there were actually some storms yesterday that damaged some friends of ours' homes. So been a very rough period. I hope this isn't something that we go through again and anytime soon. But thankfully my family is healthy.
So yeah, we want to jump into the conversation, and I'm sure you've possibly had lots of contacts, people having that you advise, asking you lots of questions during this particular time. But at a very base level, I'm not a financial analyst. Don't know economics very well other than what I read in the paper. Tell us what has happened to our economy in the midst of this health crisis.
Right. So really what you're seeing is a number of economic indicators that analysts use to kind of get a broad scope of how the economy, the world economy, the United States economy is doing, all going negative at the same time. So there are certain things where you might look at unemployment claims and you would say, if there's a small number of unemployment claims, then maybe it's a sign that the economy is doing well. Now, there are people who say, well, yeah, that's just because everybody's working 3 jobs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good jobs. But if you have low unemployment claims, then it's seen as a sign of a strong economy. If you have strong relations between countries that import and export frequently, US and China, or anything of that nature, it's something that's seen as an economic indicator of a strong economy. If oil prices are strong, it's seen as an indicator of a strong economy. And what's happened is, as a result of all these things, all of those indicators are negative at the same time. So it may be that every once in a while, two are positive or negative at the same time, but to have all of these forces going in the negative at the same time has just led to what you see now, which is really a lot of, probably a little bit of overreaction because nobody knows what's coming next. But there's never really been a day throughout this crisis where you can say, here's the new normal, and the market has been able to respond accordingly. So it's just a free fall right now.
I keep hearing people saying that the market is doing a V. What does that mean?
So it is people hoping that it's dropping in order to rebound. So when you're an advisor and you have clients who are asking you, what's my money doing? This is not one of the most fun times to be an advisor, but it's a necessary time because people need help. And when you listen to calls with analysts and people who build portfolios, a lot of them are saying, hopefully by the fourth quarter of this year, we're going to start to see a rebound economically. And they have a number of tools that they use to predict those types of things. And if that were to happen, then it would be a V. We had an all-time market high. We've had some terrible, terrible lows recently, and they're projecting that it will go back up the other side on the positive. And I think that those are things where you don't want to react out of fear as an investor, but you also want to understand that it's all a projection. When you look at even the death estimates from what's going on with COVID-19, a projection is only as good as the information you have at that time. And if that information changes, the projection changes. So I think the best thing people can do right now is just behave the way that they would behave if their circumstance hasn't changed, and just hope that in time, the market will recover and you'll be on the right side of this thing.
So a lot of people, their 401ks have taken a hit, and there's an immediate need for some to have money and access to cash. And I just want to, for a few moments, talk about the CARES Act. And one of the provisions of it deals with borrowing against your 401k. Is it advisable, and what exactly does that provision mean in terms of what Congress passed?
So I'll give you, to answer the question, I'll give you some context into how a 401k loan typically works so that you'll understand the context behind the changes that were made from the CARES Act. So there are two ways that you can access a 401k typically. The first is you can take a withdrawal, which would be the same as you just going into a bank account and taking money out of a bank account. Well, if you are under the age of 59 and a half and you're not taking that money out for some very specific reasons, you have to pay a 10% penalty on the funds that you took out. And you also have to pay income taxes on the money you took out as if you earned it. So think of it this way: if you took a $20,000 withdrawal, it would make it look like you earned an additional $20,000 when you filed your taxes. The other way that you can access your 401k is through a loan. And the loan, because it is a loan, you don't have to pay taxes, you don't have to pay a penalty. And what your employer will do, or your 401k provider will do, is they'll actually allow you to repay that loan over the course of typically 5 years by taking extra money out of your paycheck. So you just keep working like you would have in the past, and every 2 weeks, some of that money will go to repay that 401k loan. Now, what Congress typically did was they said, or the IRS typically did, is they said that you can take the lesser of 50% of your 401k balance, or $50,000. That was the maximum that you could take. You could either take half of your account balance, or you could take $50,000, whichever was the lower of the two numbers. What the CARES Act did was they increased the limit where you can take a maximum of either 100% of your 401k balance or $100,000. So they greatly increased the percentage and the amount of the 401k loan that you can take. Now, in terms of whether you should do it or not, to me, it all breaks down to, what do you have to do? Like, if you're just somebody who's in a situation where thankfully your job hasn't been impacted, and you're still able to make your expense payments, then it's not something I would do just because you have the ability to do it. Now, if you're in a person where you have no other option, then it's something that's available to you and you can look into it. What you want to be aware of is, right now, you can take a 401k loan because you're still working. The problem is, if you are still working, you can repay that loan over 5 years. But if something happens to that job, you have to repay it within a much shorter window of time. So the problem is, if you're in a position where you took money that you didn't need, and then now that job that you thought was sturdy ends up being a layoff because of coronavirus or COVID-19, then now you have a loan where if you don't pay it back in short order, you do have to pay those taxes, and it could end up being just an even worse problem than pulling those funds from somewhere else.
Wow, that's huge. So as this is a provision of the CARES Act. I think there are two other major ones that people are looking at. One deals with or speaks to small business owners, and the other one is what everybody's talking about, their Trump check, right? Individual stimulus checks.
That Trump personally signed himself.
Yeah, he signed them himself. Yeah, so
first to business owners out there through this CARES Act.
Right. So with the business owners, the main thing that people have been reading about is the Paycheck Protection Plan. Mm-hmm. Paycheck Protection Plan was a loan program that was started, and it was essentially started to allow small business owners to keep a certain percentage of their payroll throughout this crisis. There have been a number of missteps, not to get political, but I mean, number one, the need has been greater than the funds that were set aside. But if you were fortunate enough to be able to get the funds, it really is a matter of the type of industry that you're in when you're determining whether you should keep the loan or return the loan. One of the things that people talk about is, the loan can be forgiven. You don't have to pay it back. But there are actually a number of stipulations regarding that forgiveness. And the main one is the money has to be spent on a certain number of expenses over an 8-week period of time. You don't get to just take the loan and sit on the money. You have to use it within an 8-week period of time. And if you don't use it for those things, it just turns into a low interest loan. And there are many small business owners out there who don't necessarily need more debt than they already have. So there are some industries where if you are in a position where keeping payroll is something that getting through this next 8 weeks does mean your business can continue as planned, then it's a great resource if you can get it. But I am seeing some restaurant owners or retailers or clothiers who are saying, I need to know that my business can be intact 3 months from now. What's the point of me bringing people that I already fired back for 8 weeks when in that 9th week, I don't necessarily know that I'll be bringing in enough revenue to keep paying?
Right.
So you want to have that conversation before you apply, because if you do not have the ability to do that, then you just took on more debt that really didn't put you in a better position. So it's all based on, can your business make it through the next 8 weeks and beyond? And if you feel like that question may be no, I don't know that I would be necessarily, hiring people back just to turn around 8 weeks later to fire them again.
Yeah.
So what can a business owner do who may not get that payment protection? How can they adapt their business model to sustain their business for the short and medium term?
Right. So it's requiring a radical rethinking of all types of business models. And the best example that I can give you is in the restaurant industry, where I don't see this as something that's going to, recover, by the end of this year. I think that for a very long time, our dining habits will change. So you're seeing restaurants who are saying, not only are we having to change the way that we deliver food, but we have to understand that it may not be next year that people want to come and sit and dine like they did in years past. So I'm seeing restaurants who are now doing family style meals where they're delivering those family style meals instead of just you order what you want and he orders what he wants, and just saying, no, we have a family style meal. I'm seeing people who are partnering with hospitals and saying, we're going to provide lunch to your essential workers. Chefs who are doing cooking classes and paying or having people pay to do cooking classes over Zoom. And that's just an example of one industry who is understanding that you can't just sit and hide and expect business to return as normal when this changes. Our lives have changed, so your business model has to change with it. So to me, and I'm speaking for myself as an entrepreneur, we're looking and saying, how can we adjust the services that we provide to the way that people may live their lives when this ends? And if that means doing more virtual meetings, if that means doing more group calls, it is really just sitting in a quiet space and looking at your business model and understanding the way that I was profitable before may not recover. So I need to pivot in a way that responds to the way that people are changing.
Yeah, it's about, I think the post-COVID world is requiring us now to be adaptable, to be flexible, and to bring a skill set to it that's going to be able to flourish in the new world that we're living into in this moment. So if I'm a person, just shifting our conversation a bit, who qualifies to receive the stimulus check, $1,200, however many thousands of dollars they receive, and I'm an individual, this is coming to my household, what would be advisable for me to do with that money, and I'm still employed?
If you are still employed and you are not having significant trouble meeting your expenses, and that job right now looks like a sturdy job, I would not be using that money to pay things that you don't have to pay. Now, if you want to do things where you can use that check to make minimum payments that you're struggling to make, a mortgage payment, a student loan payment, a credit card payment, whatever it is that you need to pay that you are struggling to pay, then you can use that check for those things. But if you just have that check and it's somewhat found money, you may not need it right now, I wouldn't be looking and saying, ooh, I have this money, I can knock out this small credit card that I've been trying to knock out for all these years, because you don't know how long this will last. So if you're fortunate enough where your employment is stable, I would take that money and I would stick it in a regular old savings account until life gets back to some semblance of normalcy. And when that happens, if that money's still there, then you can use it to pay down a smaller debt. But don't pay anything that you don't have to pay in a time like this, because I've seen people who, when this started, oh man, my job is fine. And now 6 weeks into it, that job that you never thought would be at risk, a dentist, a barber. I mean, the things where it's just like we always thought that these people would always have business. They've been impacted. So if you have a job right now, sit on the check. If you don't have a job and you desperately need that money to pay for things, then there's the ideal and then there's your reality. If your reality is you need the money, then spend the money.
Mm-hmm.
As it relates to the stimulus check, we had a question emailed to us from a person that says that the federal government, their preference is for you to have a bank account to deposit that check into. However, some persons don't have a bank account, or they don't want it deposited into their bank account because of overdraft fees that they already have on that account, and they would prefer for the check to actually be mailed to them in person. So if a check is given to them and they deposit it into their account, will they still get those overdraft fees against their stimulus check?
Right. So far be it from me to tell a person not to pay their debtors. But something to keep in mind is if you owe the bank $200 and you put a check in that account, they're going to subtract their $200. So with the stimulus check, what's happening is anybody who's getting that check deposited is somebody who already gave the IRS the authority to have any tax refunds direct deposited into their account. No one else is going to have that money direct deposited. They're going to receive a check. Now, if you have a bank account where you owe the bank money, I would not be retroactively going and saying, hey, you can deposit the money into this account, because they're going to take it. So you would actually want that check, and it may take longer for the check to get there. But when it gets there, you might need to go open an account at another bank, or, in worst case scenario, go to a check cashing place. It's not typically advisable, but understand, if you owe the bank money, then they're going to subtract what they owe from that check before it goes into your account.
Do you foresee banks changing their requirements of having a minimum amount in your account to open up an account in the future as a result of this economic crisis that we're in?
I'm not a fortune teller, but if I had to take a gamble, I would say that in terms of account minimums, it wouldn't really benefit a bank to do that. because banks live off of deposits. You know, the more money that they have flowing in through deposits, the more they can turn around and loan at interest to other customers. So I think that it may be, I won't say easier, but I think it may be status quo in terms of just having an account. What I think will change for the worse, unfortunately, is I think it will become increasingly difficult to get financing for things like home loans, for things like auto loans. You're already seeing some lenders raise their minimum credit scores above 700 in terms of what it takes to qualify for a home loan, which is unreal. I mean, it is unreal to say that you have to have on the low end a 700 to get a home loan, and you hope that this is temporary. But I think that as banks look at the economy and realize that the risk of people defaulting on these loans is increasing, they're going to become more and more conservative in terms of what they'll lend.
Yeah, yeah. I want to shift the conversation just a little bit, you know, a little bit outside of what the pandemic has done to our economy and our individual financial situations. You know, the conversation that we have at least annually is very sobering for me because it causes me to look ahead 20, 25 years and, you know, see how I would love to have my life, how I want my life to look, and, you know, to make preparation for what happens after my passing to make sure my wife and my children are taken care of. If you're speaking to a 25 to 40-year-old person that, you know, you might see them on social media living their best life, they're employed, they're all of a sudden an international traveler and, you know, have new automobiles and all that kind of stuff. What are some of the principles that should be guiding somebody who's 25 to 40 years old in how they need to manage their money now so that in the future they'll be in a much more stable place?
Right. You know, I am one of those, you guys know me, you know, I love to travel. So I'm all about how can we position people to be able to travel and travel responsibly in a way where they're taking care of their finances and, you know, buy a car if you want to buy a car, but there's some things that you want to put in place before you buy things that do not gain in value. And some of those core principles, the first one would be insure what can be insured. So I see people who, you know, for anyone who is working and has to work, the most valuable financial asset they have is their ability to get up and work, right? It's the one thing, if I took it from them, they wouldn't be able to go on. And if they could, they wouldn't work, right? So you protect your ability to work through disability insurance. But it's one of the last things that people are willing to purchase. And disability insurance is literally an insurance company saying, if something happens to you and you can't work, we will give you a percentage of your pay back to you. When you look at life insurance, I can't tell you as an advisor who works with overwhelming majority minority customers, how many times I've heard the phrase, I don't want to make somebody rich off my death. Or I just need, you know, I just need them to have enough money to bury me. And to me, that is something where there's a reason that as a community we feel like that. You know, the life insurance industry historically has done some shady things to minorities. So there's some deep-seated reasons why people feel that way. But it doesn't rob you of the responsibility to make sure that your death does not become a burden to your family. And if you want to leave a legacy, which the Bible tells us we should do, then it's not just about not being a burden, it's about truly providing a legacy. To me, I would hate if I were to be taken from this earth at this age for me to just say, oh, well, at least my wife doesn't owe any money on that car. You know, I want her to be in a position and my children to be in a position where they can maintain the lifestyle that they were living when I was here. And if they choose to pursue something financially, they can pursue it. But I do not want 5-10 years from now, if I were to die, for my wife to be worrying about money. And if that's a risk, if that's something that I'm afraid of, then insurance, the literal definition of insurance is the shifting of risk from one party to another. So if I can shift that risk from myself to an insurance company for pennies on the dollar, why would I not do that? You know, so to me, it's just a reshaping of how we feel about what we're leaving to our loved ones. And you just want, I hate it when I see, not in the sense that I have any problem with somebody doing a GoFundMe or anything of that nature, but to me, if someone does a GoFundMe, just let it be because you're just really kind. Like, I do not want my wife's picture on a GoFundMe because I didn't do what I could have done to make sure that she was okay. So it's just, you want to make sure you insure the insurables. In terms of beyond that, growing assets, to me, I always want people, especially young people, to have enough cash to get through 6 to 12 months. And that sounds like a lot of money. I'm not talking about 6 to 12 months of salary. I'm talking about 6 to 12 months expenses. And that might have sounded like a lot until we went through this, right? And you understand that having a lot of cash and having good credit is something that is extremely, extremely important. And I see a lot of people in our community, because it's a lot easier to put money into a 401k, and maybe that money is being matched by your employer. I see people who have 10 times in their 401k what they can actually access in their savings account in cash. And to me, if you're 25 to 40 years old and decades away from being able to get that money, why would you not have just as much or a significant amount in cash that you can go get from the bank tomorrow? So treating your savings and your credit like gold when you're early on in your investing career is extremely, extremely important. So to me, I always encourage younger investors to have a savings account. You may feel like you're losing out now, but focus on getting a high dollar savings account and getting your credit in order, because it will open up so many opportunities for you. And then if your credit's in order, if you have cash on hand, then you can go travel, then you can go get a car. And it's not something where everything has to work perfectly for that to have not been a bad decision. Like, if I can look at somebody who has the insurance they need, who has savings, who's been investing, and their credit is strong, and then they want to go buy 3 Teslas, I don't care, because they've taken care of what they needed to do on the front end.
Yeah. And so I guess to throw into that equation would be, I did all the things to get a good paying job, and I want to do all those things, but I got student loans. So when those get thrown into the equation, do you advise to just try to pile it on, knock out the student loan debt, and then wait and do those things, or find a way now to get, purchase disability insurance or life insurance policy? What is your advice to those to be able to, make an adjustment in what they're paying per month to the student loan servicer, and to take whatever that amount was that you're saving and put that towards insurance? I'm just curious to know, because I'm sure some are saying, well, all that's good, but you don't understand, my student loan bill is as much as, purchasing a Mercedes or something like that.
Right. Well, in terms of my ability to understand, we work with people who individually owe $700,000 in student loans. So that's not a couple. We work with people who, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 in student loans. And if that sounds impossible, I assure you, it is not. If you go to a private college, then a private master's, then a private dental degree or medical degree, it's very, very possible. So I understand that it is definitely an issue of competing dollars, right? Like, I got $10 to my name, and if I'm going to contribute to all these things, it's going to take $12. So what do I do? And to me, if you have federal student loans, then the best I can say is you need to go and read on the federal student aid's website to understand the repayment plans that they have available to you. And one of those plans is called income-driven plans. There are a number of income-driven plans, but they're plans that are based on a percentage of what's called your discretionary income. So you're basically able to pay based on a percentage of what you make instead of what you owe. And there are a number of ways, and you can study up on those ways on the federal student aid's website, to actually manipulate that payment so that you have the lowest required payment possible. Now, that doesn't mean that you should pay the lowest payment possible, but it means that having the flexibility to have a very low required payment gives you the ability to save in some months and pay your loans. But in a month where you need to get 4 new tires, now, thankfully, you don't have some incredibly high student loan payment where you can't make that loan payment and buy the tires. So it's just crucially important that people take control of that loan process and stop avoiding their student loans and understand that you can actually use the loan servicer's rules to your benefit. And then you can do it in some unique ways. A lot of people don't realize that if you put money into a pre-tax retirement account, it will actually lower your federal student loan payment. If you put money into a health savings account, which allows you to save for your own health expenses, after the age of 65, you can use money in a health savings account for whatever you want to. It doesn't even have to be for health expenses. But if you put money in that account, it can lower your student loan payment. If you're an entrepreneur, then a portion of the self-employment taxes that you pay can help lower your student loan payment. So if you take the charge to get the knowledge, then you can actually find that there's a lot more flexibility than what you think. And a lot of the things that I talked about as well, even if you have private student loans, if you have good credit and strong income and strong savings, you can get a better interest rate on your private student loans, which will lower your loan payment. So all of those things actually work together. It's just the tendency is when you have all this stuff on your plate and you don't know where to start, to just dig your head in the sand and ignore it all. And unfortunately, ignoring it all can cost you more money than just taking on the mantle and saying, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to learn this until I understand it. And when I understand it, I'll realize that there are some ways out of what I'm dealing with.
Yeah. Wow. So either people have a choice. Either they go seek out the knowledge themselves or they get a financial advisor.
Well, you know, I try not to shamelessly promote, but that to me, not everybody needs a financial advisor because there are some people who have the time and the ability to self-teach. But there are also people who, even if they have the ability to self-teach, they don't have the time. So to me, you know, you definitely put people on your team who have either the time or the expertise that you don't have. And if you're in that scenario, that's a perfect example when you need a financial advisor. Or even if you're trying to self-teach, finding an advisor you trust and figuring out what they've put out in the world. So I have a YouTube channel, Brenton Harrison on YouTube. We put up videos on basic financial literacy for maybe somebody who's not willing to take that plunge, but gives you the ability to just learn. There are blogs out there. Find a voice that you trust who gives you information in a manner that you can understand it and start to build your knowledge base. And if you feel like you still need that help, then reach out to somebody you trust who can help and who's certified, not somebody who, you know, just like somebody told you is really smart, like somebody who has some liability insurance behind their name in case something goes sideways. So I think that can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. I have a question as it relates to persons contributing to their 401k. Mm-hmm. Perhaps they are contributing aggressively and they've taken a hit in this season. Do you advise them to contribute less aggressively, or does it depend on their age?
It definitely depends on their age, because if you are decades away from needing that money, like we discussed with somebody who's 25 to 40 years old, I'm having some very uncomfortable conversations with clients right now who they're watching their account go down 15, 20, 25%. And they're saying, oh, I just want to pull out of the market, or I want to stop contributing. And they ask me what I think they should do. And for somebody who's 40 years old, if the situation's right, my answer may be put more money in. And that may not be what they want to hear, but it's always easy to follow investing principles when things are going well. And the first rule of investing is buy low and sell high. So when things are going well, that's not something that's very tough to do. But when things are actually low and it's time to buy, it's a tough thing to actually pull the trigger and do. So for somebody who's 40 years old and has a sturdy job and is looking at their account fall, but it's not like they need the money, they just feel uncomfortable watching it fall, it's a tough realization that there will be times in your investing life where it's uncomfortable to keep investing. But if you're going to follow those rules, you have to keep doing it. Now, if you're 5 or 10 years from needing that money, then it may be a deeper conversation of, do I need to make my accounts less aggressive, or am I better off putting that money in savings because I'm 55, I'm 60, I'm 65, and I'm going to need that money really soon. So for those people, it's a different conversation. But for the people who are still 15, 20 years away, you do not want to pull yourself out of the market just because it's uncomfortable. The illustration that I always give in terms of why 401ks work so well to pull you out of negative market experiences is this. If I give you $1, and in that first year that you invest the dollar, that dollar loses 50% of its value, then at the end of the year, you have 50 cents. So in year one, it went down negative 50, you have 50 cents left. Now the next year, if it regains 50% of its value, you do not have $1. You only have 75 cents. 50% of 50 cents is only 75 cents, and adding another quarter. Now I give that illustration because a lot of people think, oh, if I go down 50 one year and I go up 50 the next, then I'm right back where I started. But in order to get where you started, you needed to put money into that account when it was down. So that when it recovers, you can recover with it. If you have money that's going down and you don't put money in while it's declining, it actually makes it harder to get back what you've lost. So all of these market principles work in concert so that if you understand how it works, you understand that, hey, if my job is stable and I have savings and my bills are paid, then this is actually the perfect time to put money into my 401k.
Scripture says those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. So while the market is down, fund those accounts.
Yeah, I will. If I could take it away from the Bible and do one that's a little more, what I would say, a little more secular. there's a saying that says, when there's blood in the streets, buy property. And that is because when markets go down, opportunities increase for those who are prepared to take advantage of them. So that's in the stock market, that's in real estate, if you want to discuss that. When markets go down, it opens up opportunities for those who are prepared to take advantage. And if you're prepared, then you'll come on the other side of this, not being thankful at the lives lost, but being thankful at the opportunity it presented for your portfolio.
Yeah. Let's talk about buying property. I saw a report yesterday that there is an increase in persons leaving urban areas, flocking to the suburbs because they don't want to be in an area where there's a dense population. There is also a report that home ownership prices are increasing. Is this the time for persons to buy, or should they wait until we get out of this economic crisis to purchase a home?
I think that there are two things that will play themselves out in the next few months that will be interesting to take note of. The first is banks are, as we discussed, greatly increasing the credit profile that you have to purchase a home. You also are seeing people who are leaving Memphis and heading to Bartlett or heading to Cordova and saying, I want the fresh open air. I don't want to be within 5 feet of people because of all that's going on. And I think that there are definitely opportunities for the people who are selling, because if you're out in the suburbs and you see somebody who is like, hey, they're desperate to get out here, my home value has increased, then maybe it's an opportunity to sell. But I also think that there will be buyers out there who have a credit profile strong enough to purchase, who will stumble across properties where there are just not many qualified buyers next to them who can put a bid in on that property. So I don't think on either side of the fence that somebody's going to get, stuck in the cold. I think that if you're a buyer and you're a seller and both of you have strong financial profiles, then there's going to be opportunity on either side. Now, there are also going to be a huge number of people out there who may have had the ability to purchase if not for the increased credit requirements. And for those people, it may be that they have to rent for a little while longer while things calm down. It may be that they have to put a bigger down payment down to get into a property than they were expecting. But if your credit is pristine, if you're still employed, if you have those savings, then I would imagine that there will be an opportunity whether you're a buyer or a seller. If you're not in that position, then it probably wasn't the ideal time to buy in the first place. And you probably need to focus on just shoring up that credit, shoring up those savings, and seeing how these next few months play out.
Perhaps you are in a home, or perhaps you're in, but primarily for homeowners, because several states have said, I am suspending mortgage payments and rent. You don't have to pay your rent. Several states have said that, including my home state of New York. What do you say to the person who says, well, I don't have to pay my rent for the next 2 months, or I don't have to pay my mortgage? Because you can have a mortgage that's backed by the FDIC, or you can have a private mortgage. What do you say to those persons who hear you don't have to pay your mortgage or you don't have to pay your rent?
Yeah.
There are federal backed mortgages where, fortunately, they are granting relief so that people not only don't have to make mortgage payments right now, but they also are not going to have to make what's called a balloon payment at the end of this period, which is essentially, hey, however many months that you didn't pay, now you have to pay us all that money at once when we lift this program. Fortunately, for federal backed mortgages, that's not the case. You don't have to pay, and they're essentially going to tack that money onto the end of your loan repayment period. And if that's something where you don't have to pay and there's other things that require your financial attention, then I would take advantage of it for a federal backed mortgage. If you have a mortgage that's not federally backed, then there are a number of questions that I would want you to ask before you took advantage of that. Number one would be, will I have to make a balloon payment? Because to me, it makes no sense at all for you to say, oh, you don't have to pay me for 3 months, but at the end of the 3 months, you have to pay me all that money at once. Well, what was the point of you offering me that 90 days? So you want to make sure that there's no balloon payment. You also want to make sure that you understand how they're going to report those missed payments to the credit bureaus during that period of time. And you do not want to assume that because you've worked something out over the phone and don't have it in writing, they're not going to report those missed payments as late payments or missed payments to the credit bureau. And there are just things that are very, very tough to pull out of. There are a lot of lenders out there where, let's say that you missed a mortgage payment and you're trying to get a different home. Well, some lenders will look at your credit report and they will say that you can't get a new home loan until you are at least 13 months removed from your last missed mortgage payment.
Wow.
So you want to be crystal clear on how that stuff is reported and what the terms are, and you want to have it in writing so that if they do something that they're not supposed to do, either intentionally or unintentionally, that you have the documentation to submit a dispute to a credit bureau, to challenge whatever has gone wrong, because there are so many companies who may be well-intentioned who just don't realize what they're doing, or a computer program that credits something wrong. And you want to make sure that you have everything in your corner so that when life gets back to quote unquote normal, that you have the ammunition to recover from whatever has been adversely impacted.
So I know we can talk all day. You so resourceful and helpful. Could you tell us how do people find your YouTube channel and how to get in touch with the Henderson Financial Group? And
absolutely. On YouTube, we're just Brenton Harrison.
I'm going to excuse myself. My kids are really they're quite energetic at this moment. But you guys can close this conversation, and I'm going to go back into being a mommy mode. Forgive me. It's been great. And Brenton, thank you so much. I will talk to you again when we do our annual talk every year. And you take care, and please give your wife and your son my regards.
I will. My pleasure. It's good to talk to you. So on YouTube, I'm just Brenton Harrison. I have an individual channel, Brenton. Last name is Harrison. I also have a website, brentonharrison.com. And for our firm, Henderson Financial Group, it is seekhfg.com. So SEEK, like hide and go seek, HFG, like Henderson Financial Group.com. So we'd be happy to talk with anybody who is in need. And if it's something we can serve, we're happy to do it. If it's something where we need to refer you to somebody we trust, we're happy to do that as well. And at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that someone has a resource they trust. If that's us, then we're very grateful and fortunate. But we want to make sure that we leave people off better than when they came to us.
This is awesome. Before we log off, I want to pray with you and pray for others who are out there who are wading their way through this pandemic and are facing financial difficulties, and for those who've certainly been infected by the unemployment. But before we pray, we are excited about Mother's Day at the Boulevard online. There are two opportunities for you to join us on Mother's Day, 10:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. We have a special musical guest. Brian Courtney Wilson is going to be ministering with us through song on this Sunday. And so we're excited about that. And we want you to invite as many people as possible. But also, don't forget our challenge, Songs for Mama. We want you to find your favorite mama song. I want you to record it on your iPhone, your Android, upload it, and we want you to hashtag it Boulevard Mom. We want to hear you shout out your mom and sing her tribute throughout this week. Do that before this Sunday. And so also, as we come to the close of this time, there are also just a reminder for you to give. You can go through our various outlets to give electronically through PayPal, through PushPay, through Cash App, and then you can always mail in your contribution to 70 North Bellevue Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee, 38104. But wherever you are on this afternoon, join us in this just brief moment of prayer. Let's pray. Eternal and gracious God, we thank you for wisdom and for knowledge and for those in who you have imparted the gift to help us to be good stewards of the resources that you've brought into our lives. Thank you for Brenton Harrison and for his wealth of information, for the resources that he shared during this conversation. And we pray that you would continue to bless him, bless his wife, their family. We pray your continued blessings upon the Henderson Financial Group and others who are financial advisors who have been given that gift to help us navigate the various seasons of life and to do the best that we can with the resources that you've blessed us with. Now, God, we're lifting before you people who have been adversely affected, whether it is losing money in their retirement accounts, whether it is those who have lost a job, whether it is that small business owner who is hanging on by a thread to keep their staff paid and to keep their business going. God, I pray that you would be to them everything that they need you to be during this time. And so, God, we continue to look to you to be the source of our strength, the strength of our lives, and continue to navigate us through this very difficult moment in the life of our world and our nation. And God, we're asking these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Brenton Harrison, for taking the time out this afternoon to share with us. And we hope you all have a phenomenal rest of the day. Catch us this Sunday or catch us next week for next week's Turntable. God bless you and God keep you.